uncle Gus, or of the family of 16, 14 who survived. Those two were always alive and a part of their family, and it's part of our, of course, Christian faith. And this is a family that loved their faith, right? They loved learning too. They loved to tell stories, and that's part of what we can share with you. I think one of the stories that we were going to share with you is, as part of this love of learning, was Grandpa Barney's interest in books, right? So he was farmers, and of course, having survived the potato famine, right, in Ireland, being farmers was of primary importance. They could put real food on the table and not watch. In Ireland, I think over 1 million people died in that potato famine in the 1850s, and so they remembered that. But Barney was he was going to make sure his children were educated, and Ellen was becoming a school teacher, and for both Barney and Ellen, education was very important. The children all went to school. Young Ellen, Nell, as they called her, was preparing to teach, and Bernard Sr. would promote education by ordering books and magazines, especially Catholic ones, from St. Paul that he would later sell to the neighbors. All the Casey children read from their books, these books, so he went up to St. Paul and would pick up and bring back home a big sack of books. The train ran through their property, and so as it was running past the Casey farm, he would toss out this satchel of new books, and a couple of the Casey boys would run out and pick up the satchel and bring them home, and they learned to read, and they read those books, and that was part of their entertainment at home. And when they got to write, they were writing poems and stories and telling stories and doing their homework, I'm sure. So as the train passed by, the Casey boys would go out into the field and would be there to fetch the books. Right? Education, of course, was important. Religion was their priority importance, I think. They just loved their faith, and it meant so much, and it certainly helped them through things like the loss of Mary Ann. And Sister Ann, we've got a great story about, and it comes up. It's in Father Crosby's book, Thank God Ahead of Time, and some other places, but it's really worth retelling here with you. Right?
So education and religion were the two outstanding fruits of this growing family. But getting to church on Sunday was a matter of logistics, because they had only one wagon. So they took turns. On one Sunday, half of them would go to church, and the next Sunday, the other half. But for those that stayed home, they had their own church service. The prayers were read, the readings discussed, and when the church group got home, the sermon was discussed. So all would benefit, and as a result, each of those children learned how to really listen, and then to give it back to others. They learned to express their faith. And as a family, they all participated, even the toddlers, in the evening prayers and the rosary. And the mother usually led the evening prayers. School was another matter of importance. The older boys went to school as much as they could. Our grandfather, being the oldest, had the least formal education, as he was needed to work the farm with his father. The same was pretty true with the first 4 or 5 boys. The younger children had much more opportunity for school, and they excelled. Even though the older ones didn't get as much formal schooling while on the farm, they read everything they could find, recited poetry, and held debates among themselves and their neighbors. They had a thirst for learning. From this family of 14 adults, the Casey family produced 3 priests, 2 lawyers, 2 businessmen, and at least 5 teachers. But life was not tedious and all study. The teenage Caseys were a lively group and loved singing and dancing, with barn dances as being their favorite. Their home was a place all the neighbors loved to visit. It was always lively and fun, and it was always open house. On one occasion, a friend left a violin, and Barney began to teach himself to play. Even though his playing never became very proficient, he improved enough to be called upon to play at the barn dances. Then we're going to skip a few years. Barney was instrumental in trying to bring home additional money for the family, and he had various and sundry jobs in Stillwater, and then finally in Superior as a streetcar driver. And so he writes to his family to come, sell the farm, and come to Superior. So Superior had a promising future as a boom town. So Barney persuaded his family to sell the farm and come to Superior. This proved to be a wonderful decision, for there were good jobs to be had, and the opportunities for higher education was within reach of all. After an accident on the streetcar tracks that really shook Barney up a bit, quite a bit, Barney talked with his pastor, who encouraged him to go to the Diocesan Seminary of St. Francis de Sales in Milwaukee, also known as the German Seminary, because most of the classes were taught in German. You know, this Irish lad, he had an 8th grade education, all right, but to learn German? This pastor also warned him that now at age 21, he would be entering at a high school level with young men much younger than himself, like about 7 years younger. Barney tried very hard, but found the studies difficult because of the German language. Finally, his seminary superiors advised him that he better go home, but to consider going to a religious community. So he went home discouraged. All that summer, he prayed to discover what God wanted of him. His priest friend and spiritual director suggested he write to the provincial superiors of the Jesuits, the Franciscans, and the Capuchins. All 3 said they would take him. With the Feast of the Immaculate Conception approaching, he asked his mother and big sister Nell to join him in making a novena to Our Lady, asking for her help. On the day of the feast, December 8th, after receiving Holy Communion, he distinctly heard Our Lady tell him, "Go to Detroit." This meant the Capuchins. Even though it was close to Christmas and his family wanted him to stay for the holidays, he made plans to leave immediately. So on December 21st, in the midst of a heavy snowstorm, he left home, arriving at St. Bonaventure Monastery on Christmas Eve, and his life as a Capuchin began.
So this is a picture that we have of the family in Superior. They built a home there. They were, from starting out in a 2 or 3 room log cabin to a farm with 5 barns and outbuildings and a home on it, to moving to the city and building their own house. And I think our grandfather Jim I think they had a farm too, Sister Ann, outside of Superior, right?
I think they might have had a dairy farm. Or
A
something
dairy
like
farm
that.
there. So, Barney Senior was a sheriff of Superior. He's got his badge on there, and there's Ellen, mother of 16, 14 who survived. Right, they're the three girls that were the last three that were born. This is our grandfather, Jim. That's his older sister Ellen, that was the teacher, and that's Father Solanus sitting down next to him there, right? So this is before he, and that's a picture that's blown up, and you can see in the museum there. It's before he entered the seminaries. We mentioned that in this group that celebrated in 1913 their 50th wedding anniversary, that there were three priests. This is a picture of the three priests. Father Morris is on your left, and who was involved in the missions in Montana, and eventually joined the Capuchins, I guess, in some manner. And next to him, of course, is Father Solanus, and then there's here it's Father Edward. He eventually went to the Philippines in 1934 and served their founded schools out in the Philippines. Was impounded, I guess, in when the Japanese invaded the Philippines, and he was virtually starving to death in 1945 when they were liberated when the Americans came back to the Philippines. So he had plenty of stories to tell and much to remember. We do have a copy of his journal from those last days in Batanzas prison, south of Manila. Monsignor Edward was a poet. He started writing short stories and poetry when he was in college as a seminarian at St. Thomas College in St. Paul. He wrote one poem a really significant poem, and again, it's one that's referred to. It's entitled the Brother Sacristan. It's also in your handout. It's on the back of the page that had the preface about the children dying, and give me a couple of the stanzas from it. So, and again, this was one of the poems that was in this collection of memoirs and writings from the 50th anniversary. It's a significant one because, as you know, Father Solanus was ordained a simplex priest, right? So he didn't have the faculties for hearing confessions and for preaching publicly. I think that's the way that works. And I know Father Crosby, Mike Crosby, claimed he was the only one that ever had that, and he thought it might have had something to do with his being Irish and this, German Wisconsin part of the country. In any case, Monsignor Edward, there's the Brother Sacristan. Monsignor Edward wrote, Father Edward at the time, wrote this poem to Father Solanus, and we have Father Solanus's comment on it. The bottom of this poem in the text we have, it's in Father Solanus's writing, and we'll show you with that comment too. So this is the way that Brother Sacristan goes. He's encouraging his brother. He also calls out how important it is to be humble, and in the cause and the advancement of the process, right? They for that first stage they had to declare a heroic virtue, and the heroic virtue, among all these Irish people with kind of big egos, I think, and sometimes that he was recognized for his virtue of heroic humility, right? So the Brother Sacristan, it says, the God of mercy, meek and humble, holds his reign of peace in tabernacled cell. I was thinking of Father Solanus as the sacristan and taking care of the linen and making sure that the altar is always worthy of our Lord. While spotless order quietly enfolds the place where man's Redeemer comes to dwell. With reverent love, a modest figure kneels to pay the voiceless homage of his heart. Then, silently from place to place, he steals the worship of his fingers to impart. Each object there receives his tender touch, the snowy linen, flowers, burnished bell, while conscience whispers sweetly, it is such for his dear sake to do each duty well. Dear Lord, he whispers, dearest crucified, touch my heart, my poor heart in penance to repair in some degree the luxury, the pride, the gold, neglect that leaves you lonely there. He lingers still, and fain would there abide where evening shadows fill the chapel dim. At last he goes, but leaves his heart beside the faithful little lamp he loves to trim. So, now, one of the things that's interesting about this particular poem, one, it's from one priest to a brother priest, and it's about this situation of being a simplex priest in an age when everybody went to confession once a week and that wasn't allowed to preach publicly. He did give these favorinos, I think they were called, right, at the time when the Capuchins had this tradition of bringing out relics and healing ceremonies. We have this note from Father Solanus about the poem Brother Sacristan. He says, the poet's ideal sacristan that's described here, being so careful and humble, should hardly discourage any of us in case we find ourselves wanting an appreciation for the privilege of services so exalted in the sight of heaven as the everyday sacristan. On the contrary, it should rather stimulate our determination in all humility to foster faith in God, which alone inspires divine hope and appreciation for supernatural ideals. And so, clearly, the focus of our presentation of Family Remembers is Father Solanus, and you can catch so much of his spirit in this kind of dialogue with his brother, Father Ed. Father Morris also received a poem. Father Morris's poem, I think, is this one called 10 Years a Priest. Father Morris was ordained. He had gone to the seminary in Milwaukee, had come home. That not working out, he eventually, I think, went to and was ordained in June of 1911. And 10 years later, Father Ed wrote a poem to him saying, hey, we've been priests together. We even got to celebrate with each other for the wedding of our parents. Like keep the microphone up. And this is on the third page there, right? 10 years a priest. 10 years a priest, dear Reverend Brother Hale. 10 years of service in the glorious cause of God to make his holy will prevail among the weak who violate his laws. For 20 years, a rover long, you strayed a lonely exile from the Levites class, now hoping, now despairing, while you prayed that someday you might say a single mass. There was a brilliant morning, bright with June, 3 brothers at an altar, an array of God's love, sweeter than the sunlit noon, caressed the priestly robes you wore that day. It was a gray October morning when our parents came with reverent step and slow to pledge in golden vows their truth again. You sang the Mass. Your blessing bade them go. Toil on, dear Father Morris, many years, God's bountiful increase be always given. So one priest would certainly encourage the other, inspire the other, and as we say, this was Father Solanus was such a special person, right? And the context for that was this family of 16, 14 who survived, and the last of the stories. Sister Ann mentioned this poem, "The Old Home." And we want to finish with that, and we're kind of moving towards our closing remarks with you. But and then we'll ask if there are any questions that some of this might have brought into your minds. I have to tell you, both of us, when we saw that this was scheduled from 12 to 3, were a little unnerved, right? So we've been kind of careful not to go off script, and but our storytelling kind of skills, such as they are, they work a little better when they're just not on script and kind of reading to you. Anyway, I mentioned this earlier. Monsignor Edward, when he was a seminarian at this St. Thomas College in St. Paul, he was one of the editors of their literary arts magazine, and in the version for 1905, he graduated in 1906 with his degree from St. Thomas College. In 1905, attending St. Thomas as a seminarian, he wrote this and published this short story, and it recalls this near drowning that he had back when he was growing up there along the Mississippi River. And I pulled out 3 passages from the short story to kind of share with you. He starts it off, and he imagines himself being Uncle Ned in this big family, and the younger ones, or maybe the next generation, like we would maybe have fallen into. We both, of course, knew both Father Ed and Father Solanus. Well, in Chicago, whenever anybody came from the West Coast, we would meet them at the train or the airplanes, and often drive out to Huntington, and so that picture that's sort of come around a couple of times of that was 1948, wasn't it, Nancy? And Father Solanus. Let's see if we can find. I don't want to stop and lose track here, but that one over there, right? That over on the right-hand side with that's Nancy, or Sister Ann. Nancy then, right?
It's one and the same person.
And of course, Father Solanus are in front of the Huntington monastery. There are the stairway that went up to the entrance to the monastery, and that's my brother Dean. I guess he's 6, and I'm 3 years old there in that picture, and that kind of.
And I had just finished high school.
Wicked Irish visions that we were. So A Brave Rescue is the title of this poem, and Uncle Ned is sitting there. It's a stormy night in December, and the children have come up to him and they've said, "Tell us a story, Uncle Ned," and so he decides to. That's my demon again. Guardian, please don't. All right, thank you. Actually, one of the reasons, I had 2 reasons for sort of balancing this. One is to make sure everybody had a copy, and we hope you all take this home and let it help you remember this lecture roundtable topic. But I also want to show you the version that I'm working with from this 1913 typescript of this is the Brother Sacristan poem, and at the bottom is this typed up note on the version I have of Father Solanus's commentary. So, A Brave Rescue. One summer evening, says Uncle Ned, right? There were these storms, and the setting here is the school where they all went to, the local one-room schoolhouse that Ellen was the school teacher of, their older sister. One summer evening, a score of light-hearted boys and girls carrying books, slates, and dinner pails were it wasn't bag lunches back in the 18th. Just then, a neighbor of ours driving by paused when he saw my sister, who taught the school, standing on the steps. "Well, teacher," he began, taking a pipe from his mouth, "I suppose you heard of the boy to get drowned this morning in Boardman." "No, indeed," said Ellen, who was at Mr. Deal. As she approached the wagon, the children gathered eagerly around. It was one of Dick Whalen's boys, a young feller, 12 years old, about the size of that lad there, pointing with his pipe to my brother Patrick. The latter stood a Robinson's arithmetic and a Patterson speller in one hand and a dinner pail in the other. And when noticed, he gazed at the grown at the ground and began to kick industriously at a root that straggled beside the road. Well, Patrick and Ned come back to this river that they had to cross to get home, and it had a 30-foot log bridge that they had to scramble across, and that went out to a rock outcropping in the middle of the river, and then another 20-foot bridge over to the other side. And Ned is the first to start across, and Patrick is encouraging him, and they get out to the rock outcrossing, and Patrick said, "Now, come on, you're halfway there, and we're almost finished." And Ned says that he got halfway across that second part of the bridge, and he looked down, and he saw this rushing stream, and he thought about the boy who'd fallen in, and he loses his footing, and of course he falls into the river, right? And he's tumbling and turning around in the stream, and he surfaces, and he sees his brother Patrick up on the bridge looking to see where he is. And so suddenly this is Ned narrating this, right, years later. "I don't know how my head was raised to the surface for an instant. As it happened, my face was turned upstream, and there, to my surprise, was the bridge scarcely 30 feet away. At the very spot where I had fallen, Patrick was standing, and tonight I can close my eyes and see home still as clear as at that instant. For when I felt the sweet air once more and opened my eyes, I thought it was for the last time on earth, and the scene before me was stamped forever on my childish heart. He was standing alert in the attitude of one about to spring and was watching the river intently. And when I saw his face, I knew that he had resolved to risk his life. His boyish jaw was set, his nostrils were dilated, and in his brave blue eyes there was a light that showed a dauntless soul wakened to all its strength in the presence of supreme danger. He caught sight of me the instant I rose, and just as those roaring waters dragged me down again, I saw him hurl himself with all his strength straight toward me. And so the next thing he remembers is his brother holding him up and telling him to help to paddle with his hands, right? And I did so awkwardly, but with all my might. In another moment, he touched bottom, seized me with both his hands, swung me shoreward, while a fervent "thank God" burst from his lips. Well, they get home, they do their homework. They don't make a big deal out of this accident, And in fact, you'll see in this closing paragraphs of the story, Mother Casey just kind of laughed it off, But the memory that Father Ed has of this, of his family, as he remembered what that being a part of family meant, right, was in these last paragraphs. Mother laughed at my accident that evening and jested merrily about it until I myself was able to laugh. But an hour after I had gone to bed, a nervous dream startled me from sleep, and in the dim light of the moon, I could discern the form of my mother kneeling silently beside me. A teardrop fell upon my hand. After a long pause, Uncle Ned added, "Boys, I've traveled some since that night and have met and loved and trusted many friends, but when such had proved false, when fondest hopes have been shattered, or the world has seemed a miserable place, in such times my memory has always turned for renewed faith and comfort to that image of my mother, kneeling like an angel guardian in the dim moonlight beside my bed." Well, that's what we remember when we say Venerable Solanus Casey, the family remembers. That time that Sister Ann met Father Solanus running up the dock at their waterside home and on Lake Washington and recording his favorite poems. He chose this poem, the Old Home, and I think Sister Ann, I have to get back to that. My copy of the old poem is there's another slide where, but at some point you learned that poem, right? And so we thought we'd kind of bring closure to this with Sister Ann's reading the old home to us. You have it on the last page there, or at least the first and last stanza, right?
I really have liked this poem. I've loved this poem because to me, I get so many vivid images of that family life and how they lived and the fun that they had and the struggles that they had as well. So, when we were young, the world was hung with beauty everywhere. We loved our home. We loved to roam mid woods and fields so fair. We tramped around St. Helens Mound or herded cattle there. At night we'd lark till through the dark Dad's grand old voice called, "Prayer, prayer, boys." Then Mother led the prayers, we said, though each in turn took part. And sweet became love's holy flame before the Sacred Heart. Dear Mother's face, with heaven's grace aglow, her modest eyes upraised or closed, in peace reposed, her heart in paradise. And Father, too, so staunch and true, quick to defend the right, yet meek and mild as humblest child when we knelt down at night. To school we went, right well content to learn the world of letters. And as we learned, our spirits burned away the dullard's fetters. We learned each rule in that old school, then out to play and run. Sometimes we fought, but soon forgot our fury and our fun. We learned from brooks and hills and books and all the growing earth. While limbs grew strong, life all a song of innocence and mirth. Each step, each look our teachers took was molding minds and hearts and shaping souls for varied roles in life's dramatic parts. And all the time, each tale, each rhyme, each story we'd explore was planting seeds of abiding deeds that grow forevermore. They're with us still. They form our soul's deep sod to feed the self with pride or pelf, or bind us close to God.
So, Sister Ann,
Yes,
we're
Jimmy.
just about at our wrapping up, but I'm sure we didn't want to leave without reminding you that a close friend, a member of our family, was of course Brother Leo and Brother Richard too, and so we certainly recall them as we're doing this.
And I might interrupt here and say that Brother Richard is a shirt tail relation to the Caseys. Aunt Nell, the oldest girl in that family, married a Tom Trainer. Well, Tom Trainer had a brother who turned out to be Brother Richard's grandfather.
So, and you know, it's all a treasure, isn't it? It's just amazing. So, we do have, I guess, a couple of conclusions. Father Dan early on, for the Father Dan's still over, right? And he said, you know, to know a person, part of it is to know their family background, right? Behind everybody is a family, and so to better appreciate and be inspired by Father Solanus, and part of it is to know that blood kin relationship of sorts, you know, like all families, and that certainly is a conclusion that we would come to from all of this, right? Like all families, the Caseys had some really painful setbacks. You can imagine losing, you know, a 12-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old little girl.
And then they also had struggles with the farming.
Yeah.
You know, the 1 year, maybe it was more than 1 year, the wheat crop got some kind of a blight and was just wiped out. And so there were hard times. It wasn't just all fun and games. But they worked together, they prayed together, and the family still stays together. So I think with this, I think we can say thank you to everybody here at the monastery. Thank you to Father Dan, to Brother Richard, who suggested this. I guess it was Father Dan that suggested it, and then gave it to Brother Richard to put into practice. So we're grateful. But I would just encourage you, if you haven't done this already, I would encourage you to look in your own family histories. You know, write it down. Tell the stories to your kids and your grandkids. Pass on that beauty of family. Even some of the things that weren't so good. So with that, we thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Sister Ann.
Thank you, Jimmy.
And on behalf of everyone here and the Capuchins, we want to thank the both of you, Sister Ann and Dr. Jim, for your presentation here and helping us to learn more about the life of Solanus Casey and his family. And as you say, kind of the things that went on with them, and ends up being a saint. So I guess we can all kind of head towards that direction of all being saints at some time.
Amen. Hallelujah.
I want to mention that the next couple months, in fact, the next 6 months, we will be having some additional talks about Solanus. Next month, on February the 4th, we will have the Capuchins remembering Solanus. And so we hope that will be a great time and that you'll be able to be part of that. And then on March the 4th, we have Detroit Remembers Solanus. So it'll be people as yourselves that might be able to share with us some stories about Father Solanus' life and how he had touched you in some way or another. And then for April the 1st, we have Remember Solanus' Love of Christ and the Eucharist. So again, that would be a wonderful topic to see how he practiced it and put it into his life and encouraged others to be very faithful to the love of Christ and the Eucharist. And on May 6th, we have Solanus remembering the love of the Blessed Mother. We know that was a very special part of his life. And on June the 3rd, we will have his love for the poor and the sick. Of course, we know that he had a great connection with the founding of the soup kitchen. So please be part of that. And then for July, of course, July 29th and the 30th, we have the actual 60th anniversary of Solanus' death. And so please come and join us for those masses and events that we will have centered around that time. So again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day. God bless. Oh, would you have any questions? Maybe if there's any questions. Okay. Yeah, the status at this point would be that he is considered Venerable Solanus Casey, and our next step is to become blessed, and we have to be able to prove or to present a case of healing that the church will accept. And there are a couple cases that we are looking at and that we hope that the church will accept them in time. Of course, to put say next week that this is going to happen is another story, you know. It can't take place that quickly. And so with all the other cases that are there in Rome, we have to wait our turn. So.
I was about 15 the first time when we had the mass for our cousin, and everybody came.
Hundreds, right?
Yeah, it's just it was big.
But all related.
And then the second time was 1948. I had just finished high school, and
That's when
that picture was taken in front of the monastery at Huntington, Indiana. And this little guy was 3 years old. Yes.
Yeah, sure.
At Calvary Cemetery in Seattle, our great-grandparents, Bernard and Ellen, are buried, along with 9 of their children, are buried at Calvary Cemetery. And most of them are all in the same area. There's 2 that, one went with Aunt May's family, and Owen, I don't know why Uncle Owen got where he got, but anyway, they're there. With Pope Francis having us have the year of the family, this was a time that we could put into practice a suggestion that Brother Leo made many years ago when he and Brother Richard had come to Seattle, and I took them out to the cemetery to show them, the parents of Solanus and all these Casey siblings. And, I talked with the cemetery people at that time, and they thought this was a good idea. And but then I didn't do anything more. But finally, after the Pope declared this year of the family, then we got into it. And with the cemetery, actually, one of the members there did the design that we had for this monument. There was enough room at the head of my great-grandparents that we could put up a monument. Well, I was thinking of a little monument, and what came up was, it turned out to be very good size. So we wanted to dedicate this, and so on November 5th of this year, 77 family members came from across the country and from California and all around, and came to Seattle for this dedication. And it just happened that that particular day, Seattle had 1.5 inches of rain.
Oh,
And so it was pouring. I don't have, it's not here, but I have some video clips of, video clips up at the cemetery that one of our sisters took. And you can hear the rain pounding down all these umbrellas, But I think you have one picture
well, it's that corner one up there, and I'm afraid to try to.
to enlarge it. That one. There it is. Okay, good. Yes. On one side is a picture taken from the golden wedding party, and it's not the same as the one that's out here in the museum. There are many of their spouses and some of the grandchildren that had been born. There were about 34 figures in this picture, and they did a marvelous job of reproducing this in a ceramic, steel, whatever, and so you can identify each of those people. And that was Brother Richard and Father Larry came out and all these 77 family members. It was amazing. A wonderful time to get together. Too short a time, but I met, the next generation or the next two generations of people that I didn't know. So it was a wonderful experience. Yeah,
Yeah, another question. How could anyone follow that? Right? So the figure on the monument is a statue of Father Solanus, right? And that's facing the tombs of our great grandparents, but the Barney Sr. and Ellen Murphy Casey, and then our Daddy Jim, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mom and Aunt Aurelia's Daddy Jim, and Emma are among those buried with them, so are our own grandparents. So this was special. Of course, you recognize Brother Richard there, and Father Larry Weber, and Sister Ann, and that's Monsignor Ryan is the other priest there. And they put together this really lovely liturgy, and each branch of the family had got a chance to have a member stand up and do a part of the reading, so there's a lot of bonding. It wasn't like bonding like losing two sisters, but it was a real special event. And Monsignor Ryan, I guess, just completed 50 years, was it?
He just celebrated 50 years of ordination, and he's still the pastor at the St. James Cathedral.
And it's 1984, was it? When did you start there?
I started in '82.
All right, so
Father
Sister Ann has been the associate pastor of the cathedral parish in Seattle for. I guess I better not use that term, right? But this is Amoris Laetitia. They say, the joy of loving your faith and church.
But Father Ryan is also. He came in 1988, and he's been there ever since. And he's a good friend.
And very supportive of the
and very much so.
Solanus cause. Yeah.
One day on staff, at a staff meeting, he came out with something that just blew me. We had talked for some time of having some kind of a resource center for the people on the street, the people getting out of Harborview Hospital or getting out of jail, because we're right in that neighborhood. And so we'd been working on that for quite some time. Well, at the staff meeting, Father said, well, it's a reality. We are going to have this resource center, and we're going to call it the Solanus Casey Center. And I just jumped out of my chair. What? And he didn't tell me ahead of time? So.
Other questions? Yeah.
I think some of that, yes. We had, we sent those records here to the monastery, but they're old and fragile and pretty scratchy. But they did, you did reproduce some of that, because we've got Father Solanus saying a few words and playing. Did he play the violin?
From what I remember, he does. Part of it is part of that poem is how God made me to know Him and to love Him and to serve Him as sure the same. And then it goes on with some more, but I don't remember it all. I'm sorry, but anyways, that was there are some. We do have them recorded. Yes.
Go ahead, please. Soon, we hope.
Yeah, if Father Solanus is beatified and then canonized, his body will remain here in church. Yes, and at this point, we're not sure that the body would be exhumed. Most likely it would remain as is. Not necessarily, no. Yes, but then they have, yeah, right.
You,
I was present for that explanation. I was one of 2 family members invited to be present for that. It was an awesome experience, truly. There was difficulty getting the casket out of the ground. They opened up the gravesite, and there was water. Water in the vault, in the surrounding of the casket, and well, they used a pickaxe to put a hole in the bottom of the casket, and this is very irreverent, but I'm going to say it anyway. I overheard some Capuchin saying, "Oh, there goes Solanus down the driveway." But then they brought the casket in, opened it, and now he'd been dead for 30 years. And that body was so recognizable. I would have known him anytime. He was mostly intact, not completely, but his arms, his forearms and his hands that were very bony to start with were reduced to bone. But besides being recognizable, when the medical people that were there examined him, his skin was so soft, and you wouldn't think that would be. But they everything inside the lining of the casket, his habit was in shreds. So he was clothed with a new habit and placed in a new casket, and then carried out to its present place. But I was very, very blessed to have been there for that.
It is bronze. Bronze, yes.
I can tell you one story about his eyes. When I was here in 1948, and the Conleys had taken me down to Huntington to see him, I was discerning whether to go to the convent or not. I had another career type very much in mind that I was very interested in. But I also had this tug-of-war with me that maybe I should go to the convent. So I said to myself, well, Solanus knows all these things ahead of time. I'll just ask him. So I got him by myself, and I told him that I was having this struggle with, do I go to the convent or do I not? And he looked at me, those bright blue eyes twinkling, and he smiled and said, "That's between you and God." He wasn't going to get into that.
Other questions over here?
I went to college for a year, and then I entered. Sisters of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary. Well, our mother house is in Longueuil, Quebec, right near Montreal, and that was our foundation house, and our province headquarters are at Merrillhurst, Oregon, which is near Portland. Well, no, I taught elementary school for 11 years, and then I moved into high school and taught a variety of things. But I got a degree in physical education, and so I did a lot with the girls. I taught at Holy Names Academy, Spokane. It was a girls' school, and so I was doing that for several years. Then I got into community service, and I was superior at a couple of places, including our provincial house, and that kind of thing. Then in 1982, I had a sabbatical, and my mother was not doing well, and I wanted to get back to Seattle. And so there was an opening at St. James Cathedral. So I went to see, and lo and behold, I'm still there. Oh, goodness. There's 400 something now.
Back here. Of course, he sat there. Yeah, he died in 1957, right? So, and July 31st, I guess we'll celebrate the 60th anniversary of that this summer. By the way, both Sister Ann and I are hoping to be here and want to be with all of you and celebrate that special moment and hope that the cause continues. Yeah, there's a kind of a famous picture. This is one of the sources that we use. This is our Aunt Bonnie, we called her. On the East Coast, we call her Aunt Bonnie, and out there in the West, they call her Aunt Bunny. But this is Sister Miriam James. She was of the Holy Names order, and was Sister Bernadine Casey, named after, I guess, the Bernards, right, including Father Solanus. So, yeah, in 1957, there's a picture, and there are just throngs of people. I understand something like 30,000 people in the streets outside, 30 or 40,000 people. Maybe I'm way off.
Well,
In all, we figured there was probably close to 30,000 people that visited
Okay.
the monastery here at the time.
Mhm.
For the funeral itself, there was probably a good 3,000 or 4,000 people here.
Mm.
So you can imagine the church holds 300, 400 people. So everybody was outside, basically. So.
And of course, for a long while, he was buried right behind the monastery, right? And when we'd come back and visit, my mom would go back there and to pick little pieces of grass from around the tomb, and of course, those just that whole kind of sense of awe, I guess, that respect, and probably part of Father Ed's concerns that and why really growing up, like, I never heard that there was any talk of miracles or anything with Father Solanus. That was just, he was one of Mom's 14 aunts and uncles, and when he came to visit us in Chicago, he stayed overnight at our house. I think one of the first times I served Mass was for Father Solanus back in the early 50s, he has that raspy voice, It was wonderful. No, he was just so down to earth and just loved children. And of course, our family, he couldn't leave. It's hard. The Irish have trouble winding things down, right? In case you've noticed. And but one of the ways to kind of bring closure to things was to ask Father Solanus to give us his blessing. So before he left the house, we'd always get Father Solanus's blessing. So special. Yeah. So that funeral was just amazing and certainly memorable. And you're going to hear more about that in later lectures, I'm sure.
There's one story about his blessing. His sister Margaret, our Aunt Margaret Casey Ledoux, lived down in California. She and Uncle Frank had their golden wedding, and all of a sudden somebody called out the window of their home, because everybody was out in the yard. The yard was fixed up for this big picnic for the celebration, and said, "Everybody be quiet. Father Solanus is on the phone, and he's going to give us his blessing." So, as the story goes, everybody knelt down in the backyard, and I don't know whether they could hear it, but anyway, he gave his blessing to special blessing to Aunt Margaret and Uncle Frank for their 50 years, and then to everybody that was there.
Maybe one or two other questions. We could take maybe one more. Last question. Yeah, please.
Yes.
Father Solanus did die at St. John's Hospital. I guess it was on the 3rd floor. They don't have the plaque right at the room, but down in the hallway, there is a plaque there honoring Father Solanus as to where he was. Yes. We have a picture or two of Father Solanus, too. Maybe about 3 days before he died, he was in his habit, and he was in the hospital room. And, of course, I think probably all know the story insofar as when the morning that he did die, Monsignor Ed was there with him, and I understand that Father Solanus simply all of a sudden said, raised up himself in bed and said something to the fact of, "My God and my all," and laid back down and died. So I give myself to Jesus Christ as well, my God and my all. So, Richard,
Just on the part of both of us, right? Or Sister Ann, something else? Another thought? It's just been so wonderful. It's been such a great experience that we keep over and over again saying that formula of thank God ahead of time, and we certainly do thank God for this time. Thank God ahead of time for all the other lectures that are coming. I'm wondering if you would mind just leading us in that prayer for beatification, and we can all sort of, it's not written on anything, but we can remember it probably.
Does someone have a prayer card, perchance? Yes, please.
Oh.
How about you leading it?
Go ahead, Richard.
No, I don't have one.
Oh, okay.
O God, I adore you. I give myself to you. May I be the person you want me to be, and may your will be done in my life today. I thank you for the gifts you gave to Father Solanus. If it is your will, bless us with the beatification of Venerable Solanus, so that others may imitate and carry on his love for all the poor and suffering of our world. As he joyfully accepted your divine plans, I will ask you, according to your will, to hear my prayer. I always say, for the elevation of Father Solanus to a position among your angels and saints, excuse me, whereby his example can be carried both far and wide, to be taken up by so many more, carrying on his mission, your mission, excuse me, of mercy and love, especially for the poor and suffering of our world. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Blessed be God in all his designs. Good. That's why I'm not in front of the microphone.
And thank you, every one of you, for coming. This was great.
Father Leo, thank you so much. That was so good.